Hello there, this is James Scrofty, just 1978, and recently the ghost of Watcher Azazel began haunting me again, refusing to allow me a moment's peace until I reviewed the 1997 anime series Berserk, so spoiler alert. After the first episode began in medias res, showing the protagonist Guts beginning his admittedly cliched quest for vengeance by killing the first hench demon or apostle of his former friend Griffith, the rest of the series, all 24 episodes, every single one of them, was nothing but the backstory leading up to that point. I'm not kidding. After 24 more episodes explaining and exploring the agonizingly obvious and entirely superfluous, with at one point the fact that Guts had left causing Griffith to fall into a self-destructive depression for some reason that only made sense to the author, destroying all of his progress in the Kingdom of Midland and rendering almost all of what had happened before that point in the anime entirely moot, the series ends with the protagonist beginning his quest for vengeance against Griffith, and to add insult to injury, this backstory and character development, which apparently required 24 episodes to do it justice, could all have been summed up as a variation on the first narrative arc between Kenshiro, Julia, and Shin in the original Fist of the North Star, or more specifically, there was a love triangle between three warriors, two male and one female. One of the male mercenaries, Griffith, wanted power and became a demon king, destroying the woman who loved him and sacrificing all of his other friends and followers in the process, and the sole surviving male warrior, Guts, who actually loved Casca instead of merely being the object of her unrequited devotion, thus set out on a quest to destroy him in turn. Indeed, after seeing the first episode and concluding that this is basically Fist of the North Star, but set in a fantasy anime version of medieval Europe, the fact that I knew as soon as I saw her that Casca would be nothing but the woman in the refrigerator, i.e. the motivation for Guts' revenge against Griffith, meant that nothing between her, Guts, and Griffith really meant anything at all, especially not the cliche of Casca hating Guts at first because Griffith valued him more than her, but then eventually falling in love with Guts as well, and thus feeling torn between the two men, causing me to effectively ignore the grossly problematic aspects of her character, including the fact that she was essentially a makomori, that is to say, the token strong woman of another ethnicity who is torn between her surrogate daddy who saved her and the new guy who she loves/hates. But in the end though, while the fact that this series was nothing but the intro for the actual anime, which is only now being released almost 20 years later, could have been avoided by cutting out the first episode and thus not leading us to expect the rest of the story instead of merely the intro to it. Although, as I say, that would have simply caused me to focus my ire on the anime's grossly problematic perception and treatment of women, particularly Casca and Princess Charlotte. The best comparison I can make is to MovieBomb's review of the recent screen adaptation of World of Warcraft, in that in their own way they are each the perfect example of a screen adaptation done wrong.
It's clear that director Duncan Jones really wanted this shit to work, to make his mark, do something really different, and set a new standard for blockbuster filmmaking. And Jesus Christ, you have to feel bad for this fucking guy, because what he's managed to do instead is set a new standard for having missed the forest for the trees. The flaws are baked right in from the get-go. Warcraft is technically a video game adaptation, but someone decided that instead of adapting a story from the games, or even making a new story in the world of the games, the place to start was retelling in pedantic, beautiful mind-level detail the setup of the original game. Yes, this essentially is an entire fucking movie's worth of the kind of shit Lord of the Rings blew through in bullet points at the first 2 minutes of the first movie, or that Star Wars wisely consigns to the opening title crawl. Previous video game movies may have failed because they were like watching someone else play the game. How boring is that? But Warcraft is like watching someone read the game's instruction manual to you, loudly. And that's some heartbreaking shit, because it's the kind of bad decision that only a truly love-struck fan can make, assuming that the mechanics and mythology details are so fucking important that we need to learn every single piece of it rather than skip ahead to the goddamn interesting stuff. Make no mistake, this kind of attention to detail and narrowly focused worship of the material is the reason that the armor and weapons and spells and the orcs, I mean, holy shit, the orcs are fucking amazing in this thing, all look so damn good, but it's the exact wrong instinct for telling an interesting story. Especially when that story needs all the help it can get to be worth telling in the first place. Setting aside that for all its novelty, the World of Warcraft is basically just the same high fantasy hodgepodge that every other kitchen sink fantasy realm has aspired to post-Gygax, it's still pretty astonishing to realize that once the movie is done introducing every location, race, faction, region, sect, and all that shit, someone seriously thought we needed 2 full hours to understand a storyline that boils down to the green stuff is bad.